There is no way to imagine America without New Orleans, and this great city will rise again.
Good morning. Presidential pledge. President Bush promises a massive effort to rebuild the devastated Gulf Coast as he once again takes personal responsibility for government failures. Fundraiser in chief will get reaction to the speech from the president's point man for hurricane charity relief, former President Bill Clinton. And here comes the bride and the groom, too. Sarah and Mark are getting hitched in a hometown wedding this morning, and we've saved a special seat just for you today, Friday, September 16th, 2005.
From NBC News, this is a special edition of Today with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer.
And welcome to a very special split edition of Today on this Friday morning. I'm Katie Couric in Stevensville, Maryland, on the Chesapeake Bay for Sarah and Mark's wedding. Matt left me at the altar because we've got a lot of news to cover this morning, including that very important speech from President Bush last night. Matt?
Katie, that's right. In his primetime address, he urged Congress to approve a gigantic reconstruction project for the Gulf Coast states. Some estimate it will cost upwards of $200 billion. That would be 6 times what the federal government spent on relief and recovery after the 9/11 attacks. It's a crucial moment in the president's second term, and coming up, we'll talk to a man who understands the pressure President Bush is under and the challenges he faces. We're talking about former President Bill Clinton, Katie.
And Matt, as you well know, it was an extremely violent week in Iraq. This morning we'll get reaction from the King of Jordan, King Abdullah, in a very rare interview and talk with him about where we go from here.
And we'll switch gears in a big way, Katie, because she had him at hello, but now Renee Zellweger and her hubby of 4 months, Kenny Chesney, are saying goodbye. She claims she's a victim of fraud. What does that mean? We'll try and figure out. Plus, a Las Vegas gamble that didn't pay off, the armored car robber who just turned herself in after 12 years on the run, Katie.
And Matt, of course, we're going to have much more on the reason we're here this morning, of course, and the reason I'm dressed this way and I've embraced a bad hair day. The wedding of Mark Dale and Sarah Raley. They're getting ready as we speak. And everyone here is very excited about the big moment. We're all looking forward to having a lot of fun here. But first, as we mentioned, there's a lot of serious news to talk about this morning, including the president's primetime address to the nation from the battered city of New Orleans. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell is at the White House with more on that. Kelly, good morning.
Good morning, Katie. For those who were personally hit by the wrath of Katrina, the president offered sympathy, contrition, and a promise to rebuild. For the rest of the country, concerned about future attacks or disasters, the president promised to fix the problems.
With a backdrop lit by stage lights and power brought in by the White House, Mr. Bush offered words intended to show he knew how awful it was.
Fellow Americans calling out for food and water.
The president conceded that 4 years after 9/11, Americans had the right to demand a more effective emergency response.
I, as president, am responsible for the problem and for the solution. So I've ordered every cabinet secretary to participate in a comprehensive review of the government response to the hurricane.
And he ordered that disaster plans for every major city be reviewed. For the wreckage of the Gulf region, the president pledged a huge commitment from taxpayers and encouraged charitable giving.
We'll not just rebuild, we'll build higher and better.
He called for tax relief and incentives to spur business growth.
As many jobs as possible should go to the men and women who live in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama.
Proposed a Homestead Act, giving away federal land to encourage survivors to return. But Mr. Bush did not explain the likely costs, far more than the $62 billion already approved.
One of the largest reconstruction efforts the world has ever seen.
Beyond repairing vast storm damage, the president acknowledged a divide of race and class further exposed by Katrina.
That poverty has roots in a history of racial discrimination, which cut off generations from the opportunity of America. We have a duty to confront this poverty with bold action.
And he tried to deliver the compassion his critics said had been missing.
We're tied together in this life, in this nation, and that the despair of any touches us all.
And this morning, the president will again speak about the suffering and loss of those touched by the storm when he goes to the National Cathedral, and he will attend the National Prayer Service to honor those affected by Katrina. Katie?
All right, Kelly O'Donnell at the White House. Kelly, thanks so much. And now let's head back to New York, where Ann Curry has the rest of the morning's top stories. Ann, good morning.
Katie, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Well, when the president spoke last night about the massive hurricane rebuilding effort, people in Louisiana were among those watching closely. NBC's Kevin Tibbles is in New Orleans this morning with more on this story with a reaction. Kevin, good morning.
Good morning, Ann. Well, the power and the lights came on briefly here in downtown New Orleans last night as the president spoke. Another sign this city is struggling to fight back. As the president was addressing the nation from inside the closed confines of Jackson Park, inside a West Wego, Louisiana diner near New Orleans, a mixed reaction from many still unable to reach their step. That step involves opening several less damaged areas of the city to nearly 200,000 displaced residents. But many may not recognize their beloved. City officials now hope residents will make the decision to return here and not turn their backs on the Big Easy. And
NBC's Kevin Tibbles this morning. Kevin, thank you. Ophelia was downgraded to a tropical storm during the night, and today it is moving away from North Carolina's Outer Banks. The storm caused some damage to homes and businesses along the North Carolina coast. More than 10,000 homes remain without power there. Severe weather tore through parts of Texas on Thursday. 2 homes were destroyed near Fort Worth. 25 others were damaged. Today, California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger is expected to announce he will seek a second term as governor. On Thursday, he signed a bill banning junk food in California schools as part of an effort to fight what he called an obesity epidemic. And an emotional reunion on Thursday for a father and son separated by Hurricane Katrina. Arnold Learson Sr. had disappeared while helping his son escape the floodwaters in New Orleans. Well, 12-year-old Arnold Jr. ended up in Tennessee, and this week his father was located, and as you can see, in South Carolina. And Thursday, as you can see, they were reunited on live television. And I think the picture and then look on that little boy's face speaks for so many. It is now 7:08. Let's go back to Matt.
All right, Ann, thank you very much. Former President Bill Clinton is teaming up once again with former President Bush, this time to raise money for hurricane relief. He's also launched another very ambitious project, bringing together leaders from all around the world to tackle some very serious issues. It's called the Clinton Global Initiative. President Clinton, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt.
The president spoke from New Orleans last night, took responsibility, and I'll talk about your global initiative in a second, but took responsibility for the slow federal response to Hurricane Katrina and said he'll be accountable for the solution. Were you surprised, President Clinton, that 4 years after 9/11, with so much time, energy, and money spent on preparedness in this country, that we seem so ill-prepared to handle a catastrophe in a major American city?
Well, I think handling the aftermath of a natural disaster is different than preventing a terrorist attack. And I actually believe that the federal government has been quite good about that. In spite of the breakdowns that led up to 9/11, there were any number of terrorist attacks prevented in the 1990s, and there have been a lot of terrorist cells broken up since 9/11. Actually, handling a natural disaster is different, and I think what happened was we saw that FEMA had been downgraded in terms of personnel and organization, and I think that slowed the federal government's response.
You think the fact that FEMA went under Homeland Security contributed to its response?
I do. And I think taking out some of its preparedness functions and giving it elsewhere, and not having a requirement that a person with real experience made a contribution. But look, I think most Americans and most people in Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama figured that out, and they just want to get on with the work of rebuilding their community.
$1 billion for rebuilding after Katrina. The